We're going to let two noted economists now weigh in on the stimulus debate and where the economy may be headed next. Nariman Behravesh is the chief economist at IHS Global Insight. He's in Lexington, Massachusetts. Marvin Goodfriend is professor at the Tepper School of Business at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh. He's formerly senior vice president at the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond. Thanks to both of you. Appreciate you joining us here on Bloomberg. And Nariman, end the debate for us. Stimulus, success or failure?
It's a success insofar as things would have been a lot worse if we hadn't had it. Our estimate is the unemployment rate would be closer to 11% now if we hadn't had it, and the job losses this year probably another 2 million if we hadn't had it. That's a hard thing to sell about something that would have happened but didn't because of the stimulus. But that's the reality, is it would have been worse if we hadn't had the stimulus.
Marvin Goodfriend, do you agree with Nariman with those numbers?
I would say that I'm a skeptic about this for reasons I need to go into in a little more detail. Essentially, whether or not the government spending or the tax cuts succeeded in creating jobs in the current year, there's an expectational loop involved in this program which needs to be thought through before making judgments about whether or not there were net jobs created. And this expectational loop has to do with the fact that the government borrowed in order to spend the money or cut the taxes, and in the future somebody has to be taxed a little bit higher to pay back the debt. And there are people in the United States today who feel themselves in the crosshairs of higher future taxes, who almost certainly have cut back their own spending. At the same time, the government is prepared to either cut taxes or spend money this year. The net effect on jobs, I believe, is very hard to discern and could very well be negative for reasons I'll go into later if you want.
Nariman, do you buy that analysis as well? We were robbing Peter to pay Paul, if you will. There are people who expect problems down the road in terms of taxes, so they held back some, or they are holding back right now. Do you buy that analysis?
I don't, in the sense that I understand the theoretical arguments. I think the reality is quite different. They're timing issues, and I think people do react, and businesses do react to getting, whether it's a tax cut or spending increases, and they don't worry about, or they don't think that much about the future tax increases. I'm not saying they're not important. I'm just saying the timing issues are such that you do get a bang from a big stimulus program up front. Eventually, I agree that the so-called multipliers, as they call, diminish quite considerably for the reasons just stated. But there's a timing issue. So I think there is a positive effect up front, and eventually you pay the price.
Well, let's ask you about the upfront right now, or at least the short term. Mr. Goodfriend, Professor Goodfriend, if you could, even though you have your doubts about the net benefits over the long term, what's going to happen in this year as a result of the stimulus? Are we going to see unemployment continue to drop, or is it going to hang in that 10% range?
Well, my own view is that the stimulus will not have much effect on the unemployment rate for reasons I just described. I think there could be a slightly positive, slightly negative. I think the economy's recovery will take place in an organic way if left by itself. The economy has a way of healing. In fact, I believe that the healing will take place a little more effectively if the country has patience and does not try to speed up the healing with so-called deficit finance stimuluses on the fiscal side. I also think that if the economy... Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. So another jobs bill, in your view, should be out of the question, off the table up on Capitol Hill?
I just don't think it will make much difference, and if anything, I think it will set in motion perhaps excessive concern about more future tax increases to come, which have the capacity to actually reduce what we call potential output that could be achieved at some future date when we get full employment. So more talk about the jobs bill and open-ended consideration of jobs bills in the future, which this would bring about, could actually create pessimism about the farther future due to the perhaps higher expected taxes than we're even contemplating today.
Nariman, do we need another stimulus kicker?
The answer is no, and for very different reasons. I'm not as worried about the expectational issues. I do think that only about a third of the stimulus has already shown up. So another two-thirds still in the pipeline. So I think it's very premature at this point to suggest we need even more. I don't think we do. I do agree that the economy is starting to recover. It's gotten a big push from the stimulus. I don't know that we need another one. Now, that's the economics of it. Politics are very different. I think the Democrats feel the pressure to do something before the midterm election, so we may get one anyway.
Now, I want to switch gears if I could. Related topic, the Fed. We did get the minutes today, the Federal Reserve's latest meeting in January. In the minutes disclosed today, Professor Goodfriend, we did get a sense that some of the members of the FOMC were open to the idea of selling some of the assets on the Fed's balance sheet, some of those mortgage-backed securities that they've been buying up. What do you make of that discussion that took place and what we learned from those minutes today?
Well, I think the Federal Open Market Committee is coming to the view that we are on track on the recovery, and the time has come to demonstrate the confidence that the Federal Reserve Open Market Committee has in that fact. And one of the ways in which the Fed could demonstrate confidence in the economy's recovery would be to begin some small but meaningful sales of some of its assets. I believe that if the Fed is, as I believe is the case when reading the minutes, becoming more confident of the organic recovery that's begun, the Fed should demonstrate as much by selling some assets.
Nariman, your take on the minutes?
Well, I pretty much agree with one caveat, and that is I think the Fed will test the market. The thing they don't want to see happen is for the mortgage rates to rise very much because the housing recovery is still very fragile. So my guess is they're going to test the market a little bit. If nothing happens or very little happens with the mortgage rate, then they'll keep going. If, on the other hand, the mortgage rate spikes, then they're going to pull back. So it's going to be a very, very close sort of balancing act that they're going to be following in the next few months.
All right, Nariman Behravesh of IHS Global Insight, Marvin Goodfriend at the Tepper School of Business at Carnegie Mellon. Thanks to both of you. Appreciate you joining us here on Taking Stock.